Shree Country 1330 WTRE. Good morning, Greensburg Fire Chief Nate in this morning. What's going on?
Good morning. Oh, not a whole lot. Just trying to stay dry right now.
It's been a challenge, hasn't it?
It has been. It's been wet, and luckily the storm threat's over. So now we just have the chance of rain.
Finally. The
Yes.
storms, did you, many calls with the storms that have come through?
So no, we've we have actually lucked out very much so in the storm realm. There was a over near Sunman. There was an EF1 tornado this last go around of storms earlier this week that had about a 6-mile path. Luckily, nobody was just property damage in Ripley County, so very close to us. Kind of like knocking on the door. We've had some obviously tornado warnings. We've had some threats. The conditions have been just right for that. However, we have not seen any of that here. So now we just want to, but we still have to be concerned with the saturation of the grounds, with all the moisture and water, and saturated grounds and winds don't usually mix with trees and things like that, especially trees that are weaker, that don't have a great root or support system. A good strong wind will blow them over, and then we get trees down, power lines down, things like that. So it is somewhat of a concern that's in the back of the mind, but it's not huge. So no, luckily, like I said, we've really lucked out so far on the severe weather. Obviously, as we kind of enter summer, and we'll still maintain severe weather, but hopefully not as frequently as what we've had it before.
Randy Allis was telling us that the number of tornadoes is up significantly this year. I forget, on Tuesday he gave me the number, but it's up quite a bit.
Yes. Yeah. So, they have been talking to others in the weather industry. It's the La Nina thing. It's the, strong winter, strong storms type of thing. And we definitely have seen that, in an increase in tornadoes across the state, whether they're short-lived and property damage only. Hopefully, unfortunately, Kentucky and southern Kentucky was not as lucky this go around. They had multiple deaths in their area from that. The same storm system that came and produced tornadoes for us. So, yeah, anytime in the springtime we get those really hot, nice, sunny days that are beautiful to be in, they always somewhat can breed the storms to be, much more threatening than what they normally are. So, hopefully our rain chances just kind of continue to dwindle, and we can enjoy the long weekend.
As we move into Memorial Day weekend, kind of the kickoff to summer. So with that comes a lot more safety precautions to kind of keep in mind.
For sure. With school being out, obviously we need to realize that we've got a lot more kids on the roadway, whether it's on their electric scooters, bikes, walking, teenage drivers driving and enjoying the bit of summer before they either start school again or head off to college. So yeah, it's definitely more of a time to be aware. It's definitely a time to again, as we kick off summer and kick off, grilling season, making sure that, we light our grills properly, and we, make sure that we turn our propane gas off when we're done using it, and things like that. Or we make sure that, charcoal is allowed to, completely burn out. Don't just put, hot coals and ashes into a plastic trash tub, that they will melt and catch fire. Things that we've seen over the years that usually increase during this the summer kickoff, as cookouts and those type of things will be the main prevalence. If you have swimming pools, make sure that they have they are secured in some way, or you do have some type of safety devices out there. So again, we don't want to see any accidental drownings or near drownings at all. Is again those type of things are usually turn out very tragic. So yeah, it is a increased, heightened time motorcycles on the road, and more prevalence. This weekend there was several motorcycles, campers, and boats. All the fun stuff is picking up, and while it can be fun, if you still don't use some caution and have some at least a little bit of hypervigilance, then bad things can happen.
And, just being aware too of motorcycles on the road, farm equipment is moving a lot right now too, and sometimes people just are not paying attention.
No, we've had we've had our fair share of accidents involving farm equipment, whether it's people driving off into the ditch because they think they need to get over even further, or driving too fast, or just blatantly not paying attention and running into it. And farm equipment is heavy machinery that does not forgive and does not move very quickly or easily. So usually those accidents are challenging because you have to cut, disassemble, and try to remove things around the people to get them out. So while everybody tends to be in a hurry with farm equipment, we definitely have to slow down and pass when it's safe if we can, and if not, then just enjoy the slowdown and a little bit of the piece of moving at a slower pace.
You kind of touched on water safety a little bit, but outside of even the pools, you've got the rivers and the ponds, and people are going to be floating down the river. What are just some good ideas to keep in mind when you're heading out that way?
Making sure that obviously, you limit your alcohol intake. Obviously, alcohol is a depressant and can slow the, body's reaction systems. Depending on how fast the river is moving, how deep it is in areas, or if there's currents underneath, small current underneath it that continues to move, can be just as tragic as 10 feet of water. So we want to make sure that obviously we limit our alcohol consumption or moderate our alcohol consumption as we do float trips. Make sure that you have cell phone communications. You have a waterproof bag that has your cell phone in it. The GPS coordinates that come with your cell phone as being able to call for help are incredibly helpful to us as first responders, as we can pinpoint your location better to get proper people there without having to use and we have our drones, which is a nice local asset, but without having to use helicopters or any type of other aerial assets to help try to find you as you float down the river or you're stuck in some area that maybe we don't really know about. So having some type of waterproof bag to do that. Obviously the long-term things is wearing sunscreen, making sure that we want to keep ourselves from being too burned that potentially can cause problems down the road. But those are really it. Moderate our alcohol if we're drinking, as alcohol and water do not mix. Alcohol doesn't mix with pretty much anything of driving or anything like that. While it is a social lubricant, as they say, it definitely also can result in tragic consequences. So we want to make sure that you're moderating that, really having your cell phone, making sure it's charged, and having some type of waterproof bag or some type of tether attached to you that you don't lose it and it does not become disabled in the water.
Now, how as a department are you guys prepared as we move into the summer season, as far as like training and such, to deal with the water type of stuff that may happen?
So we have swift water technicians on our fire department. We have our personal flotation devices, or our life jackets, are rated for swift water, as well as still water. We do have our ice sled can double as a floating device that does get out on the water if necessary. We teach a lot of row, just throw and go, so a lot of throwing throw bags, getting people rope, and then pulling them in from the shore. So we'll go out and practice that both in water and just on the ground, and having guys grab them and secure them, as well as we do have dry suits in case we do need to make some type of water entry in still water or something like that to retrieve a person, or obviously most of the time it's animals in the ice. But we do maintain those equipment. Obviously we have our drone that has thermal technology that can hopefully help identify. We can set different temperature realms even on hotter days to identify heat signatures for people that maybe are on a bank or that are they have to be obviously above water. We do water training with Indiana State Police and Indiana Conservation Officer divers that are local in the area. They'll come to our local retention ponds, and they'll do some diving there, and we'll help them out. So we do train with with them and make sure that they are all of that. And then obviously our members are all CPR certified. A vast majority are EMTs, so we're able to then assist in giving life-saving measures to those who are in a near drowning type situation.
Always prepared.
Always.
Yes. As far as department, you've had a few new ones come on. How
Yes.
are we doing overall?
So we're still short a few. We'll be doing some hiring here probably later this fall. Working just through some logistical things and getting the budget all squared away and all of that. So we'll maintain our numbers of 30. I think right now we're currently at 27 off the top of my head, 27, 28, and so I think it's 27. So we'll be hiring 3. Hopefully here in the near future, come this fall. But right now we're managing. We're being able to manage that, well without the use of a lot of overtime or burning people out of having to work all the time or mandated to stay over, things that obviously don't necessarily help out the morale of the department. So right now we're doing well. We'll be again taking applications in the fall as fire academies wrap up, EMT schools wrap up, and things like that. Obviously, it just gives those individuals that are interested more time to finish those certifications and do that before they apply.
Do you have one more retiring this year yet?
So we do have one more retiring. Captain Trevor Cook will retire in December. So that'll add to, and that's why obviously we're going to try to hire in the fall ahead of his retirement to be able to replace him and not go down to 26 and stay at that 27 or even go back up to 30 mark at that same time. So so one retirement this year of Captain Cook at 20 years, and then obviously we'll be again then doing our hiring.
All right. We have talked a lot this month. May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
It is.
And when you look at the fire world, there is a lot that your guys see and encounter. And how do you guys deal with that as a department?
So obviously the effects of potentially traumatic events are not uncommon to first responders, especially those that make emergency medical calls as well as fire calls. And so we do annual screenings for depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, and alcohol use. And those are done, anonymously through our public safety medical, our health and fitness provider, who does all of our medical physicals every year. We've added that on, and then looking at that, results and where we're at, we judge, bringing in some culturally competent, therapists that work with first responders on a more daily basis and understand the unique struggles of those for just in general information sessions, as well as, short term we do debriefings after serious calls, kind of keep an eye on a peer-to-peer level, and then if we need to refer to counseling through one-on-one, therapy sessions, then we refer, our members on to that. Late last year, we put on a mental health first aid for fire and EMS training at the department that was attended by multiple county departments, as well as our own department, which just gives those peers, recognition and awareness of them, not only themselves but also of others in the needs and those psychological and mental needs. Is they do drive a lot. They drive morale. They drive job satisfaction. It's those other those other factors that aren't necessarily tangible, that aren't more money, that aren't more days off, that aren't that. Well, that's nice, and that plays a factor. That mental role obviously plays a factor as well. So I look at a lot of research on connectedness and belongingness, and making sure that we're making our folks feel like they belong, making sure our folks feel connected and feel like they're doing a good job. So we try to just incorporate that into our daily use of thank you, you're doing a good job. Those like little things go a long way, not necessarily to temper the traumatic events that we see, but they also help set up better protective factors for wanting the job to be successful. So countywide, we do a great job of doing just incident, post briefings and post, critical incident debriefings of making sure that everybody's okay, checking in. The sheriff's department has a licensed clinical social worker that's working in the jail that we have access to. Short term, if we need someone who's becoming competent in first responders and understands the first responder world that they do already, and kind of add to that. We have that capability with us, and a lot of times is just making sure that they're aware that help is out there, and that they don't have to go through this alone. Obviously, it's they have to want the help themselves, and so the best thing that we can do is just make sure that the help is there for that, without really forcing them to do anything that they don't want to do. Obviously, as we've learned and research has showed us, that a lot of times when we force people to do, especially mental health things, that it has a more of a negative consequence than it does a positive consequence.
I talked with the sheriff, I believe that was last week, but talking about kind of the change in used to it as a first responder being very stoic, and not that you aren't, but that emotion is okay now, and it's not one of those things that you just have to be stoic and keep going.
Yeah, I think a big push to that just goes to a younger workforce, and a workforce that just sees things differently. I think that, we talk about, generations and this, that, and the other, and every generation says the same thing about the previous generation. So, it's not a discussion on what generations are good or bad. It's this generation is probably more in touch with their feelings, and isn't afraid to say anything. Obviously, there's a big movement also of, speak up if you're uncomfortable type of thing, both, in, personally and, in things around you. And I think that, we see that, and as leaders, we have to be able to react to that and provide those things, because, the suck it up buttercup mentality is fading away. It's not totally gone yet. There is still some masculinity and machismo in the emergency services of we have to do this. We have to be strong. We have to do this, that, and the other. But yet, our numbers of suicide continue to, increase, especially on the law enforcement side, and there's a lot of documented cases of wearing uniforms, wearing their dress uniforms, and taking their own life, on the job, on the clock. And as a leader and a student of mental health, I look at that as they're sending a message that something wasn't right, and we have to counter that. We have to, help them, whether it's, maybe the job isn't, for them anymore. Maybe it's time to get out, and that's okay, that it's not your only identity. For so long, and for so many of us, myself included, it's the only thing I've ever done. So it does become identity, whether we like it or not, it does become our identity. And when you lose that identity, or something is, you don't feel like it's for you anymore. If I say, oh, this part bothers me, then, there's things that, obviously there's the ridicule, there's all of that. And we're not seeing as much of that anymore. We're seeing that, yes, it's harder to find people to do this job long term. But maybe, nobody's asked the question, but maybe this job isn't meant to be done long term. Maybe this is a shorter term type of job, and the pressures of staying 30 plus years are now, fading away. While it's nice for consistency on the leadership side, it's also understandable, but maybe this is more of a short term type of job. The stresses and the potentially traumatic events that really shake and rock your world potentially, in 3 years, there's at least, 7 potentially traumatic experiences, or what would be violent injuries or death, happening to all first responders. The normal body isn't meant to take that. The normal mind, and not that, normal's a setting on the dryer, as they always say, but, most people aren't supposed to see that. When we work in healthcare, when we work in these type of things, it is not, we're doing things that people have to do, but that it's not, the world was never really meant to do that. Breaking the news that, you have cancer, breaking the news that, you have a terminal illness, or that somebody has passed away, or even just being there as somebody else breaks that news, you're still affected by that. And so, I know as I get older, I see more death as tragic. Like, and as younger, it was just another death, and now it's like, man, this is preventable. This is tragic. And it does make the job harder, and you try to separate personal and professional, and you can for short periods of time, but so much of it bleeds over into one another anymore. The days of leaving work at home and leaving home at work are really gone, and no thanks to the cell phone and technology that has really made that happen. And I know places still say that and want that, but it's very difficult to do that. And I think realistically we can't ask people to do that, especially being connected by cell phones and smartwatches and, information at a blink of an eye, and people able to access you, so quickly to let you know that things are going on. You get some news, at work about home, it's going to change how things are. And so we have to be able to adapt to that. We have to be able to change that. And look at it in a different way, as we've really never faced this before, and we're all kind of going through it together, and we know that, these things are a real problem, and social media is a real problem, that affects mental health. And not only does it affect the mental health of our kids, it also affects the mental health of adults and everybody else. And so, the problems that we face secondary to the traumatic exposure are the same problems that everybody else faces. Relationship problems, financial problems, and it's fascinating and heartbreaking at the same time that we in the fire service sometimes have a hard time grasping onto that, because it's not just fire service related, or it's just not first responder related. And looking at those that have taken their life, a lot of them are relationship problems. Some of them are financial problems, or some type of, we got into doing the wrong thing and we don't necessarily want to pay the consequences, and so we see this as an exit. And those are the same things that the normal general population do all the time. So it's, trying to break down those barriers of, yes, we're different, we see some different things, but
you're still human.
We're still human, and we still have the same human things, and some of the human treatments and human protective factors will still work. We just have to let them work, because they're not maybe geared towards first responders. I always tell people that, if you're needing therapy, get into the first therapist that you can, get into, at least to try to mitigate that help. You can always, obviously, it takes time to shop around for therapists and find a good fit, but never necessitate or never just discount EAP, or, you hear so much like, oh, EAP doesn't, well, it's not meant to be a long-term solution. It literally is a Band-Aid, but if that's what you need to get back to ground level and to see things a little clearer, let's take advantage of that. And I would have, I think everybody, and that has, an EAP at their facility, if they don't ask about it, take advantage of that if necessary. That it is a great resource for financial counseling, relationship counseling, personal therapy. Again, most places pay for 3 to 6 sessions. It's good to, use those. Even if there's no crisis, it's still okay to potentially use those and just, see what you can come up with and potentially even feel better. So, it's a huge
using the
topic.
Resources. And
absolutely.
And also saying I need help
Yeah.
sometimes is the hardest part.
That's the biggest part is admitting that we need help, confronting the stigma and confronting the bravado that people carry, whether it's culturally or personally, of I can't do this alone. And because and in some of this stuff, I don't think we're supposed to do it alone. I think that it's definitely more detrimental. It's not that badge of courage anymore, and it's not that badge of honor. Excuse me. of I did this alone. Look at me. I get this Boy Scout badge of countering tragedy by myself, or working through a long-term relationship breakup, or the feelings of low self-esteem. I fixed this myself. While that is something to be proudful of, I don't necessarily think and don't believe that that's supposed to be done by yourself.
That's right. We're in a world full of people, right?
We are for sure. I could talk about it for days. So.
I know. So could I. But
yeah.
It's a good thing to point. And I think the county has done such a great job in covering our first responders and making sure it's addressed.
And starting the CIT team and the crisis intervention team in the county and city, partnering up with that and having trained responders to come out and mitigate those. Not only does that help take the burden off of law enforcement and first responders that aren't maybe necessarily in tune with social work and in tune with that thing, and frees them up to do more of their role, but also long-term follow-through, not only mitigating the crisis but the follow-through, because obviously it's as a healthcare provider, you see it, we can always get people to go to that first appointment, but do they come back for a checkup?
The follow-through.
It's the follow-through that is the most difficult, and having those trained CIT responders in that dedicated unit to push that follow-through. Sometimes people are just scared to do it, and they need somebody to stand beside them as they do it, and getting them to show up to those follow-through appointments and those follow-ups, because otherwise, as history usually repeats itself, we know that they won't.
It's breaking the cycles. That's what
we're trying.
After. That's right. Well, thank you so much for being in this morning and updating us on the world. Be safe, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Use your head. Don't make bad decisions.
That's right. Always make good decisions and enjoy the weather smartly, and obviously just always stay safe.
All right. Thanks so much. It's 9:03 on Tree Country, 1330 WTRE.